language is composed of sound, and then somehow meaning is attached to various kinds of sound. So if somebody goes like this, what's it mean? If somebody goes like this, what's it mean? Okay? As a matter of fact, there are a great many of these small particles of sound that have no meaning in the dictionary. And yet, we operate according to the premise that they have meaning all by themselves. So we can then go with the premise that syllables actually mean things. And if somebody uses a lot of B's, what do we say about them? What do babies say? What do babies say? Ba 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 ba. Don't they? Yeah. Babies like to say B's. Gives them pleasure. What do we say if somebody who uses a lot of T's? Well, we don't know. But look, right away you begin to have to classify in a very slight way the different kinds of sounds that come to you. For our purposes, we can talk about stops. Definition: a stop is when the tongue stops the air before it goes out of the mouth. Everybody say P. 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 Okay, what stops the air when you say P?
Lips.
The lips. And so it's a bilabial stop. And we're going back in the mouth. There are three kinds of stops. First is bilabial. And we got P and we got B. Now we say T. Say T. 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 Where's the air stopped in the mouth? T. Behind the teeth. So we have D and T, and we call them, for our purpose here, dentals. They're not really dentals, but that's good enough. They're really alveolar dentals. And then G. 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 Say G. G. Where's the stop? G. G. Yeah. It's in the throat. Let's call it a glottal. Okay? It's not really a glottal, but that's good. Let's call it uvular. Let's be right about it. And G and K. So look at B, D, and K.
What's the word?
You have to pay attention. There is something about people, and we have to take English because that's our language, that makes them want to play around with sound. So Ella Fitzgerald, what's she do when she sings a lot of the time? What's scat singing? What is it? Playing around with sound, right? But more deeply, why is it that people love to say the word God? So say it. God. In what context do you hear that word usually uttered? Yeah, in church. Right. Where else do you hear it? How do you hear it on the street? I don't want to hear any profanity, but oh God. When do people say oh God? When they're in trouble. What else? Actually, I think if you begin to do a study, you'll probably find that when so-and-so drops a pass in the end zone, the person sitting 3 seats down says, oh God. When somebody says something that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, they say, God, don't they? Why do people always say the word God? As a matter of fact, the word God is uttered more by atheists than by Christians if you just check it out. Not that we know any atheists, right? But see, the thing we're getting at here is, why would people who have no interest in Christianity or in the deity be saying the word God all the time? I've been studying this for years. People I used to play softball with, every time somebody missed a ball or hit a ball, they'd say God. And they never went to church. So I began to think about it, and I said to myself, well, it must be that the way in which the word comes out of the mouth does something for them. Good theory, okay? So I tested it. And so here I come. G, 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 with me. G, g. Back of the throat. Touch your throat. G, g. Ah. Now listen to the ah. Feel how open the vocal cavity is after being so very closed. Ga. Now, finish it off with a D. D, 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 d. Now, God. God. Now, of course, you can say it with a rising at the end, a falling at the end. steady at the end, and each sense has a different significance for us. But the point here is that it feels good to say the word God, and I'll explain to you in one way you might look at it. Before you begin to utter the G, the pressure builds up in the back of the throat. It's building, right? But you're stopping it. You're cutting it off. Now, after that pressure builds up, God, it's coming out. It's like a wave of sound that's coming through the vocal cavity and breaking over the teeth. God! So consequently, we can, from that illustration, but of course thousands of others will be given, assume that there is a meaning to sound that is separate from the dictionary kind of meaning. I want to examine this morning, or this afternoon, the sound in the poem. We took a look last time at the meaning in the poem, briefly reviewing for your notes and for your just summary purposes. In the first stanza, the meaning of the poem seems to be a direct celebration of the fullness of things. A great many examples are given of how autumn and the sun conspired together to build up the harvest. In the second stanza, we see a personification of autumn, lying on the granary floor, asleep in the half-reaped furrow, and also asleep by the cider press. In the third stanza of the poem, the meaning seems to be something now built upon the first two. Stanza 1, celebration of harvest, of autumn. Stanza 2, personification of harvest in autumn. Stanza 3, finally having come to celebrate it and to see it, the only thing then you can do is to praise it. And so how do we praise things? Answer, in song. And so the poem ends with a song. It's our song, but it's also their song. That is to say, the crickets, the lambs, the redbreast, the swallows, and the gnats. And so it's a song of nature as well. There are a good many modern composers who have songs. Gustav Mahler comes to mind, a symphony called Song of the Earth, full of this kind of natural sounds, but of course using musical instruments. I take my point of departure to examine the sound in the poem from the meaning, because I wouldn't think that the sound had any particular purpose unless I had observed at the end this song that's being sung. So the fact that the wailful choir and the loud bleat and the treble soft and the whistles and the twitters are there makes me want to look more deeply in the poem into the pattern of sound to see if I can't find out whether this isn't a deeper idea than I at first suspected. Let's go then through the poem again and start looking for the sound and see if it doesn't fit the meaning, and if it does, we can say this is a great poem. Those who were here last Friday have already done part of this. We're going to go forward and do more of it. I would like everyone to take their pencil and begin to mark their books as I read. I'm reading S's and Z's. Every time we see an S and every time we see a Z, we want to mark it here, and we want to count them up. That's the first thing. If we end up finding an inordinate number, an improbable number of S's and Z's in the poem, then we might want to try to explain it somehow. So, season. First word gives the S and the Z sound. Now, you ought to know that. Everybody say, touch here. It doesn't move. Now say zzz. It vibrates. So you see you have voicing with the Z and no voicing with the S. Now these are called fricatives. A fricative is different from a stop because a stop stops the air, but a fricative, you might use the word friction. The fricative only impedes the air. Say, feel the tongue stopping the air just in part. See. And that's what we're looking at here. These are fricatives. Now, what do fricatives mean to us? I told you, or gave you a hint here, anyway, about the meaning of stops. Now, what do fricatives mean? And that's, I guess, what we're going to try to find out from Keats, because maybe he'll tell us somehow. So we have S and Z in season, and S in mists. That's four, 3 and 1. Fruitfulness. So we have S in the end of the line. Then, close, mark it. bosom, Z, mark it. Maturing sun, mark it. So we got 3 in the second line. Conspiring, S, bless, 2 in the third line. Thatch eaves, Z, eaves, Z. You might, as you go, write a little Z above that S so that you can read it carefully. And fill all fruit with ripeness. And plump the hazel shells. Okay, Z in hazel, shells, S and Z in shells. Now mark them. Sweet, S. Set, and then still. Flowers, Z in flowers. Bees, another Z. Days, another Z. Cease, another S. Summer, S. And cells, Z. Okay? Now, does anybody quickly have a fix on how many S's and Z's occur in the first stanza? Give me a number. I haven't counted them. Roughly what? 17. Okay? So we got 17. Let's move ahead. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? 1. Sometimes S and Z. Whoever seeks, 2 S's, seeks. A third line, sitting, careless. Okay, 2 S's in the third line, the second. Soft lifted, just 1 in the fourth. Asleep, 1 in the fifth. Drowsed, Z in drowsed. S in poppies. No, sorry, Z in poppies. The next line, spares, S in Z, spares. Swath, flowers, Z. Sometimes, S and Z again. Dust, S. Steady, across, 2 S's. Press, and just 1 there. And then the last line of the second stanza, watchest, S. Oozings, 2 Z's. Hours, by hours, 2 more Z's. All right, how many in that one? Roughly. 19. 19. Okay, let's go to the third one. Songs, S and Z. Spring, S. Second line, hast, S in hast, Z in music. Clouds, Z. Stubble plains, S and Z. Rosy, Z. Gnats, S. Among the river sallows, S and Z. Sinking, S. As, Z. Lives, Z. Dies, Z. Lambs, Z. And that's all in that one. Hedge crickets, S. Sing, S. Treble soft, 3 S's in that line. Red breast, S. Whistles, S, and Z. Breast, S in breast, S in whistles, Z at the end of whistles. And then the last line of the poem, swallows, S and Z, and then skies, S and Z. And I haven't counted them now, but there are roughly 8 words, 8 or 9 or 10 words in the poem that begin with an S sound and end with a Z sound. How many in the last stanza? 20. So we're dealing with somewhere around 60 S and Z sounds in a pretty little compressed place. So we have to ask ourselves, is this accidental or is this intentional? Well, we have to find evidence to prove it to be intentional. It's not enough just to say there's a lot of them there, therefore he must have meant it. But as I said, the first reason we suspect something is because of the end of the third stanza in its meaning. All where are the songs of spring? Well, they're gone, and thou hast thy music too, he says, of autumn. If you were to hear the Song of Autumn, what would it sound like? Well, you heard it, right? Did you hear it? Okay. And when you get over the novelty of these things, you're better able to listen to them. I grant you that it's awfully hard to control yourself when your classmates are up here, doing funny things, right? But still, if you're able to listen, then you hear something else. So, first, I want to read the poem to you, and I want to just ask you as I read the poem, how do you feel? You have to sort of just separate yourself from everything in all of your life. If you were to just make a little cocoon out of 3 minutes, which is about what it'll take, then how do you feel in the context of this poem? If you had no other existence but that of the poem, how do you feel? So that's the first test. How does the poem make us feel? And we'll see how it goes with you. But pretend you're in the poem, okay? Now let me read it to you. And I don't know that I want to necessarily hit on these S's and Z's like I did when we read it through that just now. I'll just try to read it from a standard perspective. Ode to Autumn. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twined flowers. And sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press with patient look thou watchest the last oozings hours by hours. Where are the songs of spring? Aye, where are they? Think not of them, thou hast thy music too. While barred clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue, then in a wailful choir the small gnats mourn among the river sallows, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. And full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne. Hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft the redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. We're going to have to look in the most likely place of each stanza for evidence to support whatever theory it is we're making up for our S's and Z's. But do you think it'd be better for us to look in the beginning or the end of these stanzas? At the end. Why at the end? Well, poets have a tendency to always try to codify whatever it is they've gained through the progress of a stanza. For that reason, if we ever come to read a sonnet, we will always see, now a sonnet has 14 lines, but we'll always see lines 13 and 14 in a sonnet as making a summary statement, what in music we might tend to call a coda, or if you want to put it in terms of meaning, perhaps a kind of a refrain of meaning. So you're always looking for a kind of summary statement at the end of every stanza. And this is something that just seems to go with the territory, especially when you find poets using forms that are traditional forms, like the sonnet, like the ode, like a number of other forms that are standard in English literature up until the 20th century. In the 20th century, these forms are not given very much credence. So, looking then at the last 2 or 3 maybe lines of the first stanza, what peculiarity do we find relating to S's and Z's? How did you come upon that conclusion that he's talking about the bees? Larry?
Because it was talking about, it was saying that they had still more flowers for the bees until the bees thought the warm days would never cease because the summer overbrimmed their clammy sails.
So what he's saying, I'll help it a little bit. He's saying circle bees, circle cells, draw a line between. Why? Because what? Bees. They make honey and they make it in cells. Maybe we don't, maybe this isn't common knowledge? Who knows that already, now that I remind you? Not very many people. Well, it's interesting. Okay, maybe part of the problem in understanding this kind of old poetry is you just don't know that bees make cells. And that's going to definitely interfere with your interpretation of the poem. Now look, how many kinds of references in terms of meaning do we have in the last 3 lines to bees? Okay, I see bees. What else? Well, flowers aren't bees. Bees milk flowers, but
You said that, for instance.
easy. Bees and what else? Well, we don't want the pronoun.
Cell.
We have bees and cells, and there's one more.
What about,
No. You see, summer's not directly connected to bees. I'm looking for what? Or brimmed. The cell is just like a cell, a little block, a little cup, and they fill the cells, and then they build new combs. So there are 3 references here in terms of bees: bees, or brimmed, and cells. And the other references are there too, but they're more secondary than primary. Okay? So just why don't you write there bees? Now let's, there's of course one thing you want to say here, make the connection. You found out at the end of the first stanza it's about bees. You're talking about S's and Z's. What do bees have to do with S's and Z's? Okay? Say it again. That's the sound they make. Now, does everybody know that? Well, I guess we do. Bzzz. Is this bzz, bzz, I'm a busy bee? Bzz, bzz, bzz. It must be some place we learn these things. So, bees, and then next to bees, sound of bees. The poem sounds like a what? Write it down. The poem sounds like a bee. And bees go buzz, buzz, buzz. Let's look at the end of the second stanza. Now, sometimes when you're going to have personification, this giant picture right in the middle of the poem here of autumn is personification. Maybe the whole second stanza is relevant, but look at the end first. If you don't find anything there, then look above. What do you got? Patrick, do us a favor again. Read us the last 4 lines. Second stanza.
And sometimes, like a crane and thou dost keep, steady and loudly head across a brook, over cinder press with patient look, thou watchest the lamp goes hour by hour.
This one's not as easy as the first one. What are we getting at here? How does sound and meaning come together here?
You see the sound was starting to die out.
Except for the last line there, right? What there are more Z's in the last line, it seems, of the second stanza than there are at the end of the first stanza. What's he doing there? Well, not honey, but what? Here. You have to read the poem. You have to read the poem. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Coming to class and listening to my free associations or whatever they are about the poems are not nearly as valuable as you reading the poem. As far as I'm concerned, I could give anybody an A and memorize half the poems we study this semester. You get them, I'll give you an A. That's what's important. What's important is, you see, is to let your mind be influenced by the great minds that have existed in the English language. If you're speaking French, it's not going to do you any good. But we're all speaking English. And there's something in the mind of Keats that can enliven your mind if you get it into your mind. And that is simply the sound plus the meaning. You won't know that he's doing you any particular kind of good if you memorize this poem. But later on, someday, if you do a number of these, you'll suddenly become aware that you're different. You're different because you're not thinking your thoughts now. You're thinking Keats' thoughts. For the same reason people memorize the Psalms of David. Why do they do that? See, because then they think the divine spirit within them, giving it a place to lodge. And you've got to do that with other things as well. And another reason to do so is merely for the beauty of the thing. If you ever get a job on an assembly line, then you know what you can be doing while you're assembling your widgets. You can be reciting Ode to Autumn. But you see, here something's dripping too. There was something dripping at the end of the first stanza, and that was honey. And the thing that's dripping at the end of the second stanza is what? The next to the last line of the second stanza. It says what it is dripping. Cider. Cider. Now, how do you make cider? You squeeze them, squeeze apples. You make it the same way you might make grape juice. You go pick grapes, smash them, you hang them up in a muslin bag, and it drips into the bowl, and then you have the juice with which to make preserves or what have you, or just a drink. Again, there's this dripping. Again, there's an overflowing here. But this time it's not honey, it's cider. But listen to what he says. Thou watchest the last oozings hours by hours. Why does it take so long to watch the last oozings?
I would say that the pulp of the apples, as it got down to the bottom, was thicker than the last drops of it, so it would just be like it.
What kind of person? Have your mothers ever done this? Have they ever put up preserves? Anybody? Oh, come on. All right, well, look, let me ask you. Were you at home when your mothers were doing this? Were you in the kitchen when they were doing this? So you've seen this happen. Now, what kind of person would it be, hypothetical here, what kind of person would it be who'd hang around the bag of apple rind or the bag of blueberries or the bag of grapes? What kind of person would it be who'd hang around that bag and wait for the last drop?
Somebody who needs it. The lazy person.
Who's talking here? A lazy person. Who's got time to wait for the last drop from the bag? Not us, but somebody might. Somebody who just sort of took the day off. Lazy person watching oozings. So here we got S's and Z's. In first one, S's and Z's equal to B's. S's and Z's are the sound of B's. Second one, S's and Z's equal lazy. S's and Z's are the sound of... Say it again.
Sleep.
It's the sound of sleep. Is it true? Who has ever heard themselves sleep? Nobody. But presumably you've heard other people sleep on long bus trips, I guess. Now, what sound do people make when they sleep? Who can do it? What sound do they make? Listen, here we go. Go ahead. She's being very quiet. Or it's my brother-in-law, when he comes to visit, glad they sleep in the next room because I shut the door because he does it all. It hurts when you do it. Why do we associate the sound of sleep with S's and Z's? Why? Doesn't sound like S's and Z's to me. Why do we do it though? Why do we automatically say S's and Z's with the sound of sleep? That the reason we automatically associate sleep with S's and Z's, or with lazy people watching the last oozings hours by hours, is because that's the way in which in the comic books and in the media at large, every time somebody sleeps, it's S's and Z's, they're sawing logs. That's all it is. There probably is something deeper to it, but we don't need to go any deeper. First stanza, the B's are S's and Zing and buzzing around, and in the second stanza are who is buzzing around. Who is doing it here? Who is the person? Autumn. We're sure of that? Are we all sure of that? Leonard, are we sure? Is it autumn? Sleeping? You don't know. Okay. It's autumn. Steady thy laden head across the brook. Who is he? And then the last, thou watchest. Okay. Who is he talking to? Autumn. Is it summer?
The end of summer, right? Going into autumn.
Summer or brimmed the clammy cells, but who is it that's sleeping on the granary floor? So it's autumn. It's autumn. But that's the kind of clarification we'd like to have. It could be summer. Summer is going to sleep. When does autumn start for us?
November.
September.
Saturday. This Saturday. So if it were summer, we would find it natural to have summer going to sleep because autumn's coming. But it's not summer, it's autumn. But it helps us to think about it. And in the third stanza, at the end, we have all of the songs. Now, how do the songs make you feel? How does the whole poem make you feel? Nobody went to sleep. Not from reading the poem. Anyway, how does the whole poem make you feel? Did you feel when I read the poem? Yeah.
Yeah, don't you think these creatures were not really singing, but they were crying because summer was about to leave, summer was going, and the autumn was back on?
I don't notice any evidence in the animal world in which I live that there's any sorrow at the loss of autumn among my cats, dogs, birds, squirrels, and so on. They don't know that summer's coming to an end. For as far as they're concerned, there's no summer and there's no autumn. The only thing, if my cat could talk, the only thing he'd say would be, I got a thick coat of fur already. But he doesn't do that. That, see, is in his genes, that thick coat of fur. The other cat, he doesn't have a thick coat of fur. But he's 8 years old, and this is the first time he ever got let out of the house. You know, I trained that cat to be a cat. He was dropped off. Somebody dragged him by and threw him out the window this summer of a car. And the thing dragged up under my car, so we fixed him. And I had to teach him, me and my cat, the other cat. We taught him how to scratch. We taught him how to bite. We taught him how to climb trees. We taught him how to jump. And now he's getting good at being a cat, see, but it's the first time for him. His coat is not thick. His coat is thin. I'm a little worried about that critter because I don't want him in my house in the winter. I don't like these, this kind of cat. I like a tough cat. So we gave him to a neighbor. But see, he's going to have a hard winter. He's going to have to stay inside because his coat is not thickened up. Now the other cat, he's ready to go to the Arctic Circle. All right? Now how do they make you feel? Do you know you're feeling when you're feeling, generally speaking? You do? Well, then how do you feel?
I feel low.
When I read the poem.
Well, relaxed. Made me feel like I was in the setting,
The setting.
Yeah.
It's hard to put feeling into words. It may be the very hardest thing to do. We know we feel, but while we're feeling, I take exception, we do not know that we're feeling. It is only after we have felt that we know we have felt something, generally speaking. That's my experience. Since I'm just an average person, that's your experience too. Now, you'd be a very rare person if the instant you felt something, you knew you felt it. That would make you very alert. It would be a good thing. Now, I think there's usually a time lag. I finally figured out how I felt when I was 12 years old when that thing happened. I figured it out last year. It took all that time to understand why I felt the way I did. So it's not maybe a good thing to ask you, how do you feel when I read the poem? What are we looking for? We're looking for something to wrap it up. Generally, if you have 3 points of evidence to support any theory about a poem or anything else, that's enough. We've got 2. Let's find the third. We have Bees are buzzing, and that is a reflection of the S's and Z's in the poem. The poem sounds like a bee. Summer or autumn is fallen asleep at the end of the second stanza, and that has the sound of S's and Z's. So we need one more, and we got it wrapped up. We need to find it. Looking at the third, what can we say about this sound pattern of S's and Z's? All right. So we have a let-up of this very intense S and Z sound in the third stanza. Now, as I said, look for your evidence. Now you've got the way to look at it. Look for the evidence at the end of the stanza. Is there any evidence at the last line, last two lines, last three lines that there's a let-up in something? In terms of sound, in terms of meaning? Yes. Well, what is it?
Well, it went from the part of going from what we consider the sound of sleep, nasty sound of activity.
It's the sound of activity. Good. Point number one. Now, I think there's another point here, too. What else is it? Mr. Wow, what do you think? You don't have a book. Oh, well, that's your problem. Why don't you sit next to somebody that has a book next time? Don't bother now. Let me read the end of it to you. Then in a wailful choir, the small gnats mourn among the river sallows, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies, and full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft the red breast whistles from the garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. There's a release. It's very good to take this idea of activity here, because while autumn has fallen asleep, and while the bees are buzzing and falling asleep, what are the rest of the critters doing? They're singing. They're singing. What have they been doing all the time? I mean, all summer. What were they doing? We don't know. But now they've started to sing because the pressure, the heat of the summer is gone. It's let up. And gathering swallows twitter in the skies. What happened? Something what? Something flew away. The thing that flew away was the pressure the poem had kept on you. He lightens up at the end. It's a release at the end. What's released? Answer?
The sound bees.
The sound of the bees, the sound of the sleep, and as you said, Michael, as well, the sound of the heat. And so autumn is going to be what? Hot or cold? Neither. Cool, and warm, but not hot. Summarizing then, we can see in this poem a perfect wedding, as perfect as you're ever going to find one in the imperfect world, a perfect wedding between sound and meaning. We began last Friday in talking about the sound in the poem. We, on Monday, talked about the meaning in the poem. Very systematic. You got a good idea of it, I should think. And now we're talking about the sound. Now, the meaning of the poem is to celebrate autumn, to personify autumn, and to praise autumn. Celebrate, personify, praise. What better way to celebrate, personify, and praise a thing? What better way is there than to use its own language? And so what Keats has done here is to bring us right into autumn and let autumn speak to us with its own voice. He's not only personified it in terms of an image, he's personified it in terms of the sound. And we are left at the end of the poem, maybe we're relaxed, but I should think that the better way to say it is we're balanced. We're balanced because when autumn comes on Saturday, the sun will be balanced because it's the fall equinox. And there's an equal period of light and dark at this time in the fall and at the opposite time in March in the spring. And so autumn, the beginning of autumn, is a time of balance. It's a time of rest. It's a time when everything is the best that it is capable of being in nature. And so Keats gives us a great gift in the poem, because he presents us finally with the totality of the season, which we can then put inside of ourselves and carry around with us during the winter and during the spring and during the summer. So if we were to speak of our own fruition, our own harvest that might come to us one day, then what better way to look at human maturity than to talk about it in terms of the maturity of the yearly cycle of the earth around the sun. So you can kind of get mystical, you can get spiritual with it. We don't have time for that now. But next time in class, what we're going to do is have some student exercises with the poem, and I will give you a series of things to look up and list as we did with the Eliot poem. And these, of course, will be the basis of further work that you'll be doing. See you then.